Let me start with I need to kind of frame this a little bit before I get into the guts of the evening. I am not a Democrat and I am not a Republican. I'm an independent, which makes me rather unique in the United States. But I have had an opportunity to meet Barack Obama on several occasions. He was on our campus frequently, and I saw him rise from a local guy in the neighborhood to this huge celebration about a 2-minute walk from where I live in Chicago. So I may be just a little bit biased on that side. But really what I want to do tonight is I want to try to present a neutral perspective as much as possible. And I also want you to realize that although I have a really nice Chicago American accent, that I've spent about half of my life in Europe. And half of my education is in Europe and half is in the States. So this is not going to be a purely American take on this, although I am a proud American citizen and there may be a little bit of patriotism that comes out on occasion. What I'd like to talk tonight about is first about perspective and environment. I think that we have to put this whole Obama factor in perspective, and we have to look at it within the context of the environment because it's very unique, and I will do that up front. Second, I want to talk about the core components and measures of the Recovery Act because this is a monster. And it's very early in the process, and I want to share just the fundamentals of it to give us a foundation for some discussion later on in the evening. Next, I want to talk about the impact on business. And I'm going to really kind of focus in on the small and medium-sized firm and entrepreneurship because I really believe that that's the engine that's driving not only our economy but the global economy. And then we'll talk about critical success factors and business development related to the Act. And then just some concluding thoughts and some points as we transition into discussion. If you look at perspective, what I've got here is I've got what I call a scope and a scale frame. On the bottom, you'll see the scope of the mindset from conservative to liberal. And then on the other side of the diagram is a scale of government from large to small. And I've plotted 4 different presidents, 3 of which I've had an opportunity to meet. And I think Obama is really uniquely positioned. Now, this is an early take because, you know, Bill Clinton had 8 years in the White House and he's retired now. But Obama's early on, just a little bit over 100 days. But if you look at his perspective, it tends to be more liberal. And through his actions, it's clear that he favors government intervention. If you take into consideration the financial environment, if you look at the automobile industry, I mean, it's the first time in history of the United States that a president has asked for the removal of a chief executive officer of a major Fortune, probably 1,000 company at this point in time. That is unique within the context of American political and economic landscape. Just a snapshot in the environment because I think it's really important to put this in context. From an economic standpoint, we're experiencing a meltdown that no one, most of us in this room have never experienced. I have some colleagues that lived through the Great Depression, and they say that, you know, this is the closest thing to the Great Depression. Unemployment, there are sector crises, the financial crisis, certain industrial sectors, obviously the automobile. And so there are issues that have arisen that nobody's had to deal with in history. From a psychological standpoint, it's having an impact on the population. There's anomie, the feeling of helplessness, anxiety, uncertainty about the future, and in some instances, a verge of panic, where entire communities have been devastated by the closing of automobile plants, the reduction of manufacturing jobs, and just the uncertainty that's shrouding the socioeconomic system, not only in the United States, but around the world. From a political standpoint, it's a time of sweeping change. It's a defining moment. The first African American has been elected to the White House. That is monumental within the context of U.S. history. I think it's a very positive sign. And obviously, in a crisis, there's a need for immediate leadership. And I think that Obama has stepped up and has exemplified that. And we'll talk a little bit more about whether that's good or bad or where we think it is. From a philosophical perspective, which direction do you take? More government? Less government? How do you set priorities? Science versus education, healthcare versus financial reform. There's so many areas of philosophical discussion. And swift action now. Something needs to be done. There's not time to completely analyze everything. And even if you did the in-depth analysis, I'm not convinced it would lead you to a series of conclusions that would have a positive impact on the types of decisions that need to be made at this time. So what is the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009? Well, to quote President Obama, he said, we're faced with an extraordinary economic crisis. I think he's spot on there. We've responded with extraordinary action that's both unprecedented in scale and unprecedented in speed, and the jury's out as to the results. $787 billion worth of stimulus, the largest stimulus package in the history of the United States. Arguments on both sides of the aisle that it's too much, and other arguments, counter arguments, that it's too little. What does it focus on? It focuses on jobs. Try to save and create 3.5 million jobs in the next 2 years. Reduce costs and improve health care. The health care system in the United States is facing many challenges. Revive renewable energy. Very big priority, a lot of uncertainty. There's been speculation in biofuels, but there's no defined renewable energy industry or policy to address that important aspect. Winterization program, 75% of federal buildings over 1 million homes try to improve energy efficiency. Increase college affordability. As a professor at a university, I can tell you firsthand that the crisis has had an enormous impact on education. I'm from a private institution. It's about $30,000 a year for an undergraduate student, excluding books and room and board. That's a lot of money. And we are predicting a 6 to 8% decrease in our enrollment for the fall of the next academic year. And for an academic institution like IIT, we've got about 6,500 students. That is significant. Invest $150 billion in infrastructure. Our infrastructure is in need of massive rebuilding, roads, bridges. And I think he's drawing from the spirit of the Great Depression, where there was enormous investment in infrastructure development in the U.S. And then provide an $800 making work pay tax credit for 129 million people. Significant in terms of the everyday American's life. So what do the numbers suggest? What are the results? You know, as a sense of evaluation, on May 13th, there was a progress report after 77 days. And what the results are so far is 150,000 jobs were created. That's fairly significant. Over $88 billion has been made available in programs and projects. But I can tell you from firsthand experience being on the streets that although there are $88 billion worth of projects underway, there is a lot of bureaucracy, and it's going to take some time for that money to trickle down into the economy. I've had an opportunity to talk to people in industry, in education, in science, in healthcare. As part of my preparation for this talk, there is optimism, but there is also skepticism and pessimism at this point in time.